Welcome to the Love Your Inner Athlete podcast, your go-to source for all things mental fitness in sports. Whether you're an athlete, coach, or parent, you will learn as you join us to dive into inspiring conversations with those who have worked to develop their mental fitness. You will hear from people who have put in the work as either an athlete, coach, or a parent. In each episode, we bring you discussions and expert insights on developing resilience, focus, and mindset. Discover the concepts of mental fitness and learn how to use it to create consistent, durable confidence in both sports and life. I'm your host, Hans Schulstead. Let's get started. Welcome to the Inner Athlete Podcast, where we talk all things mental fitness. We sit down and talk with coaches, players, people we've worked with to talk about mental fitness. And I'm pleased today to have Mike Schwartz, a longtime friend. He became the coach at Augsburg. A year or two after I graduated, developed a great relationship with him. I remember doing goal judging for him, and I'll never forget, he told me, turn it on fast for us, turn it on slow for them. And then ran the clock with his brother several years too. That was a lot of fun. And Mike coached at Augsburg, coached in junior hockey, coached high school hockey. You actually coached Brian Bonin, right?
I missed Brian Bonin by a year.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, the one who got drafted out of that group was Pete Rode.
And he's got kids playing now, right?
Yeah, Leighton's out. He's got three of them, Leighton, Nolan, and Nash. And Leighton's out in Cowichan Valley. I think that's what it's called. It's the Seattle Farm Club. And Nolan's down in Tri-Cities, and Nash is a sophomore at White Bear Lake.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Schwartz. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey as a player and how it led you to become a head coach?
You know, that was a long time ago.
I'm aware.
How it became a coach, I think a lot of it came from, we're talking 50 years ago. And playing, we didn't have a lot of opportunities back playing. And when I was at Augsburg, and I was a pretty good player when I was 21. I was a small 17-year-old graduate from high school. I weighed 155 pounds. And then a year later, I was 185 because I found out you could drink beer. And you put on 30 pounds and all of a sudden you're a different player. But I ended up playing senior men's. And then I ended up going over to Augsburg with my brother. And the problem I had is if I didn't wear a face mask, I was one of the top 5 guys on the ice. But as soon as I put a face mask on, you couldn't pick me out from anybody. And during that time, my younger brother was playing at Phelan Youth Club, and the coach was looking for somebody to kind of help out. And I had a year to kind of sit out as a transfer. And so I started helping. And I wasn't going to play much at Augsburg with that face mask on. So I kind of started taking notice of what our coaches were doing and how we did it. And I don't know, I just kind of went down that road. So I started out as an accounting major, and I hated that. I didn't have any interaction with people. So I kind of said, well, what do I like to do? Well, I really like coaching kids. Well, what's like coaching kids? Well, teaching. So I switched my major from accounting to becoming a kindergarten through K-12 physical education teacher. And that's kind of how I got onto the coaching thing.
So are you really good at badminton then?
Pickleball, I was ahead of my time. We were playing pickleball back in the 90s. Badminton and pickleball were my favorite two sports.
So tell me how you think that journey as a coach and a player has impacted your current role as a financial advisor.
Yeah, I probably made a mistake in getting into the financial advising business. I probably shouldn't have gotten out of the hockey stuff because I was remotely kind of good at it. I needed a new challenge because I stepped away from coaching, and you make changes based on things. But as I shift the coaching gears into the financial business, there's a lot of similarities because are you fearful or are you greedy? And coaching was kind of the same way. If you came at me with a 2-man hard forecheck, you were greedy. If you sat back in a 1-2-2, you were fearful. If, it's kind of how you approach the emotional thing. And it's the same with financial things. Are you fearful or are you greedy? And we want to get you from where you start to where you want to end. And we utilize that in the right ways. And I spend most of my time, Hans, with business owners, and because I have the most in common with them. How do I keep your star player from being lost? How do you keep that key salesman there? What can we do to incentivize them? What do we do if something happens? If there's a catastrophe in your lineup, and you lose somebody. How do you replace Kirill Kaprizov in your lineup? Who's going to be the next guy after he leaves? So a lot of the same things we have in coaching have related to the financial business.
So you've seen me present numerous times. What do you enjoy the most, or what do you take the most from what I've talked about?
One, I've been lucky. I've watched you evolve. I've watched where you started, and I've seen where you've come to. And I'm so proud of you, because it's really fun to know that in certain ways I had an impact on you, whether we know it or don't know it, but that I've been able to associate with you.
About that when we're talking about how much of an impact you've had on my life.
Well, we get more credit than we deserve sometimes, on the good side, and we take more blame on the bad side. So somewhere in there's a happy medium for both of us. You worked your butt off to get to where you are. It wasn't so much Mike Schwartz doing anything for you, but I think just how relevant you are is really the thing that stands out for me. You've adapted to the times, and you're always trying to figure out, well, what's the next thing that we need to deal with a young player to help them become emotionally fit. I'm going to use that word because we're going to have a conversation over the word mental here in a minute.
Yeah. So tell me, what is the conversation about mental that we're going to have?
So when I grew up, if you use that word, it was a negative word.
Yep.
It had a negative connotation. Well, he's going into the mental institute. Well, he's mental.
Yep.
It meant they were crazy. Yep. Anything that you had to do with that word had a negative connotation to it. I think even today, it still sometimes has a negative connotation to it. As much as we work really hard to promote it as a positive piece, I think the majority of the population still look at it as a weakness.
Yes,
it's considered a weakness part of life, and it's really not. It's just a fact of life. And so somewhere along the line, I'd like to find a way to come up with a more appropriate term for what it is that we're constantly doing as coaches, and what you're doing as a sports counselor, to kind of change the terminology around it, to change it where it's got more of a positive or neutral connotation to it. Because you say that to a guy my age, and I talk about his grandson. Oh yeah, he's trying to be mentally tough. He's not mentally tough, and we like, what is he, stupid? That's our generation. That's what it was back then. We had no clue. And then, I've been lucky. I got to utilize Ainsley Smith, and I know it's on a further question down, but she changed and opened my eyes to everything, because the one thing that she hated to be called was a sports psychologist. She didn't want to be, she never liked to be called a sports psychologist. She wanted to always just be assumed as a consultant, that she helped people get onto the right track for preparation.
Yeah, well, in her book, Power Play is awesome.
Yeah, and you can't find it anywhere, because every time I do a coach's clinic, I tell guys about it. Right now, if you find a copy, it's about $200.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I'm trying to reach out to her. Dude, I'm trying to find her to get her to see if we can do a republication of it.
I have 4 of them, I think.
Well, if you got them, they're valuable right now, because Shorty keeps pumping it up on Amazon.
Yeah. Was it the first year you had her in that you guys made the run to the D3 Frozen Four?
I ended up using her when I was at White Bear Lake. So I had met her when I was at Minnesota hockey camps in the late 80s. And she was working with Kevin Constantine and Mark Kaufman down in Rochester, because she was out of the Mayo Clinic.
Yep.
I got to meet her. Well, I got really engrossed in her theories and her processes, and I embraced it. I wasn't fearful of it. And so we found ways to incorporate what she was doing, and I got to benefit. She used my teams as her test market for her products. So she utilized everything she did with my teams. She used my goalies for heart monitor readings during practice and during games. They would wear heart monitors for her. And she did research there. And then she would come in, and there were certain players that when we would do individual meetings, she would take the tough ones for me. So I mentioned Pete Rode. And Pete was a real quiet guy. His number one fear in life was standing up in front of a crowd and speaking.
That's actually the number one fear of almost every
but think about what we did on every Thursday and Saturday night.
Yeah, you did the same thing.
We're doing the same thing. The difference is he's playing.
Yeah.
And so how do we get him to overcome having any of that fear fall into play during a course of a game against Hill Murray up at Aldrich where it's jam-packed. So I gave him to Ainsley because I felt like she had more expertise than I did because I was too green. I can't handle. I have to know which players to take, which ones not to take. Ainsley Dowd, all the credit for Pete Rode being success. I might get it. It's Ainsley Smith. I think she did a great job with Pete Rode in dealing with a lot of those things. So, but her stuff has been so critical in what it is that we did that I had a jump start on everybody else on dealing with the preparation emotionally, mentally, the old terms of channel clicking, visualization, any and all the different terms that we're even using today. We were 30 years ahead of everybody else.
Let me ask you this. You did it back in a time where, things were a lot different then, but a lot of times, a lot of coaches are afraid to jump into these topics with their teams and their players. What would you tell a coach that's reluctant about the value or why they should do it?
The first thing I tell them, it's absolutely necessary that you do that you involve yourself in knowing what motivates young kids. We had a book, I couldn't find it. I lost it for many years. Before every season, I would read it. It was called Coaching and Motivation by Warren. And I lost it. And I literally found it on the internet 3 weeks ago and I bought it again. Because before every season, I would read that book. Now I'm turning into a bookaholic type guy, but every youth coach needs to have some knowledge of what makes players tick. Do you know what motivates them? I have to know whether or not I can yell at them or do I have to handwrite them? There were some players, there ain't no way I can kick him. I can't kick him. He'll go the other way on me. There's other ones that, and I was this way, right? Don't tell me how good I am. Tell me I can't do it and then watch me go. I was different that way. Thank God my wife doesn't know that yet, right? just tell me I can't do it, and then I'd prove you wrong.
Knows. I think Judy probably knows.
Yeah. So anyway, it's kind of different with every kid though. So you have to know, well, Matt, I could push my own kid. We're going to talk about that in a little bit too. But the other ones I had to deal with it a little bit differently.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that. You had kids that played college sports. What was it like to be a parent, be a coach, and how much did mental preparation or emotional fitness impact them in their journeys?
So let's go back to the timeline that we just discussed with Ainsley.
Yeah.
So I met her in the late 80s. I got married in 91. I had kids in 93. Yeah. I'm already well on my way of understanding what's going on. And I'm also trained as a kindergarten teacher.
Yeah.
So now you put all those things together and I have an advantage as a parent.
Yeah.
I have a complete advantage. The neighbor lady calls me one day because Matt's out on the swing set and it's an A-frame swing set with 2 swings and a little slide, right?
Yeah.
And Matt's walking across the top and the neighbor gal, Carol, calls me and says, Mike, Matt's walking across the top of the swing set. I go, that's okay. He'll only fall once. And she didn't know what to do with me. And I'm like, well, yeah, but if he falls, right now he has no fear of failure. I want him to keep that adventurous spirit. So I'm not going to go down and pass my fears on to him. Let's just see how it works out. Do I want him to be safe? Absolutely. Right. But
yeah,
they're 5. They don't break stuff. It's really hard. They're nimble and their bones and everything are rubber. And so they'll fall and whatever. And he's like a cat. He's a little athletic. So that's one of the things that as a parent, I never wanted to do is I never wanted to handicap my kids that way. I didn't want to impart fears on them. We'd always go, let it play out. If it gets to where it's not safe or we think it's too unsafe, then we'll step in. But we wanted that adventurous spirit about it. And so Matt ended up playing, he never really ended up playing hockey. He played through his sophomore year of high school and then he quit and he came to me and he wasn't going to try out for the high school team. And I was like, well, Matt, what the heck's going on here? You want to come to Augsburg with me every day and whatever. And you're playing your best hockey right now as a sophomore. I know you're at Hill Murray, but you've done really, really good at junior gold last year. He goes, oh, Dad, I just want you to know I never really liked hockey. Slapping the face for me. I go, Matt, but you begged me to come over to Augsburg and go skating all the time. He goes, Dad, going to Augsburg was like going to Valley Fair. I could run around at age 8 with nobody supervising me. I could go play basketball. I could skate. I could go on a wrestling mat. I could go out into the dome. I could do whatever I wanted with no supervision. Of course, I want to go with you. So that was the kind of the story of my son.
That sounds like your kid, not Judy's.
No, that's my kid.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we had a fun story. I did a mistake with him. I took him with me when we put the dome up over there. And as you're putting the dome up and you're inflating it, you walk on it so it doesn't do it. Well, a piece of wind came, and I'll bet you it sent Matt 20, 30 yards. It's popped. And, here he's 10 years old, and it flew him. And thank God it didn't throw him off the thing. He would have been dead. But he landed and he comes, oh, Dad, that was the greatest thing ever. I'm like, oh, my God, I got to get you off of here because that was not safe. So Matt was lucky. He always got the ability to do that. The other kids, though, 2 of them ended up playing college sports. Sophie ended up playing volleyball down at St. Olaf, and Ellie ended up playing basketball and volleyball at Augsburg. I don't know. You've met Ellie. I had to give you Ellie because there were certain things as a dad I needed someone else to deal with her. And so that's why I would send her to you, because I felt like I had to separate myself from being the dad, the coach, and the sports psychologist. And so I think when you understand your role, when to get in and when to get out. And that was probably my benefit of having all that learning beforehand with Ainsley.
Well, so that leads me to this next question. I pretty much know that back in the 80s, there was nobody like Ainsley.
None. Nobody. Okay.
So here's my question for you. You think that you would have been a better player at Augsburg had you had something like that?
I don't know if I would have bought all in on it as a player because of the time frame that it was, the stigma around the word mental, right, that we had. I don't want anybody, as the players always, you're messing with my head. I didn't want anybody going in and messing with my head. And that's what I think coaches are scared of doing. They're worried about messing with a kid's head, and they don't do that. I don't know that. I think I may have embraced it because I was open-minded enough. It may have changed me, but I don't know. Hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah, you're right. The other question that makes me think about, like, the stigma, messing with their head. Do you feel like that's changed?
I think it's becoming more widely accepted to be able to have someone like you available to work with kids. Because I think the coaches that come through, I really don't think they want to deal with that portion of it. Yeah, now, we had a conversation before we started recording. The high-end elite guys, they get it. They understand the mindset, the performance. They're following all the same books that you are. They're reading the Nick Saban stuff, the John Wooden stuff, Pat Summitt, Gino, I don't even know how to say his name, Remia, UConn coach, whatever they might do. They're finding the top coaches and they're following them and they're seeing what they're doing and they're understanding what it is. Most recently, I've been studying Nick Saban. Yeah, probably the most. He's more like Ainsley. He talks about preparation, but this mental piece is part of their preparation. It's about what it is that they're looking for and how they can deal with things. And he does it in such a simple way that I think he's going to be the next one that everybody kind of looks at and figures out, well, why do they do it? Wooden was the guy back in the day when nobody else did it. 12 straight NCAA titles or whatever it was. Yeah. But nobody embraced Wooden's stuff because we find a way in life to take things down instead of building it up. We do what's easy. We don't do what's necessary.
Yeah.
And so in order to do things like John Wooden, you have to be like John Wooden. That guy could memorize. He was an English teacher.
Yeah.
He memorized poems. I couldn't memorize that stuff. Holy smokes. Nor I didn't read a book until 1985, on anything. And, why? Well, it's the honest to God truth. And it's kind of funny how it came up because in 1985, I got the job up in Fairbanks, Alaska, and I'm going through the airport. And I'm like, it's going to be a 6-hour flight. Oh, there's a bookstore there. I'll grab a Louis L'Amour Western because I love Western movies. Grab the Louis L'Amour book, pay for it, get on the airplane. We're on a 6-hour flight, and I look at the book, and it's the only book Louis L'Amour wrote that wasn't a Western. And it was called The Walking Drum. And so I'm stuck with this book. But the book it changed my life. I honestly say that because the book was about 600 AD, and without going into details, it taught about how important knowledge was to having power. Not power, but the more knowledge you have, the more influential you can be, the more things that you're able to do. And that kind of got me curious. The Ted Lasso stuff about you got to be curious. Well, once you become curious, well, then you start looking for different things and you start wanting. So I started reading books. Well, when I got to Alaska, it's in the 80s, and I met a lot of Vietnam vets up there.
Sure.
And I was the generation that didn't have to serve. We never had to sign up for selective service. So I became very, very interested in the Vietnam War. And I read a lot of books on the Vietnam War, and I started to learn more. I got more curious about different things. That next summer was when I came back. Then I started getting to work up at Minnesota hockey camps, and I got more curious with different stuff. And so if you look now, I probably got 100 books behind me that I've read, and I got 3 sitting on my bookshelf by my bed that are partially read. And my wife says, you can't open or buy another book until you finish those 3 on the nightstand, because every time I come across a new one, I want to buy it because it's like, oh, okay, there's more information. I'm curious. I want to see what they say about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I have time, and the reason I have time is because I don't have a team anymore.
Yeah.
And so I'm able to do things to kind of do that. But gosh, I'm not sure if it would have made a difference or not.
True. Well, what you're kind of talking about is what I kind of call the Cold War mindset. Kind of the way that, you probably could not coach the way Herb did now. You wouldn't be able to get away with some of that stuff.
Okay, so Herbie became a project of mine. I've met Herb probably 5 times, and my brother ended up marrying his niece. But I studied Herb Brooks.
Yeah.
And what I found out is you got to go back and you got to remember he was a psychologist.
Yeah.
His degree was in psychology.
Yeah.
Now, if you watch all of the Miracle and everything else from that vantage point,
yeah,
instead of a X and O's vantage point, it's a completely different movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you recall, when Jim Craig and him had that final meeting by the trash can, and he had been trying to get Jim Craig to take this personality test, which was the Myers-Briggs test. Mm-hmm. And Herb had figured him out without the test, and he threw the test in the trash.
Right.
And so now you understand, well, what was Herb doing? All along, Herb was playing a mental game. He wasn't X's and O's. Yeah, they copied stuff and whatever, but Herb was a master psychologist. Mm-hmm. He was no amateur.
Yes, that's true. The other thing that I kind of have a question about is when you coach coaches now, what do you tell them about how to actually handle the emotional fitness or the mental fitness part of the game?
So the one thing that I preach is, how well do you know your players? I need to know more.
Yeah.
What do you know about your players? You look at society today and look at all the different types of kids that could be playing for you. There's diverse races. There's diverse religions. There's diverse genders and whatever. And do you understand all that? And do you know enough about, are they single family kids? Where do they come from, their background? Do they have money? Don't they have money? Are they going to have a hard time finding a way to the game? Do you know all that? Because even at a C level, that's important information you need to know in order for you to do your job as a coach. Because very rarely will we have kids that go on to the NHL. You might have some. I had Jake Gensel as a peewee, right? I was proud of him the other night. But we don't know that when we have them. We don't find that out until 20 years later. And somebody asked, I think it was Alonzo Stagg, they got asked, well, so what do you think about your players? And he says, I won't be able to tell you for 20 years from now. See how they turn out.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing that we have to look at as youth coaches is we don't know immediately how good they're going to be, but in 20 years, let's see how we did. That's when we'll find out. It's delayed gratification for coaches. I went up to Alaska 3 weeks ago. My 1986 team got put into the Hall of Fame, and I got really emotional about it because that's where my career started. If I don't win the state championship in Alaska in 1986, well, what does my career look like?
Yeah.
I got instant credibility.
Yeah.
And so I'm so very, very thankful to those players in the city of Fairbanks and the school district up there for giving a young 28-year-old kid an opportunity. And it was awesome. And I got really emotional about it. 39 years later, and I'm seeing kids I haven't seen in 39 years. I had tears in my eyes. I loved it. Heard what they were doing. One guy is doing video games with a sheik from Saudi Arabia, for Christ's sake. Like, how cool is that? Just different stuff that you come back and you get to evolve, and you just don't know. And then they talk about you a little bit, and you got to remember, I was only 8 years older than they were. I mean, there's more of those guys retired than I am. So it's
yeah.
So it was really a lot of fun, and it was encouraging because as you asked the question, and I go back to that time. Do you know how straight and narrow I had to be in Fairbanks? Even though I was just like the biggest screw off on the team. I mean,
I'm sure
I wanted to go drink beer. I wanted to go chase the girls. I wanted to go do all the things that they were doing, but I couldn't. I had to exude the role that I was in. And now we get to talk about it later on, and we joke about it. It's like, yeah, you guys did this, and this. And I said, don't think I didn't want to be there at the keg at the back of the truck with you.
Yeah, well, and you know what? That actually brings up, like, a lot of the stuff we hear, like, even there was a high school basketball game last week where the players actually had to hold the coaches back from, a fight escalating. And what I have always said, people have asked me what did I do to instill poise in my kid? And he is a poised player in person. But my answer is I modeled it.
Correct.
And my wife modeled it. I mean, It also helps that he's heard a lot of my stuff, and he does stuff, like I have him do stuff that I have people I work with do. But like, if you want calm kids, you want a calm team, you got to be a calm coach.
So one of the things that I always did as a coach, especially at high school and even at Augsburg, we had a quote of the day.
Yeah.
There was a quote of the day, and the kids had to, at least if they read it, I got 50% of it. If they wrote it down, they'd keep it a lot longer. And so we would tell them, hey, keep a notebook, write these down, keep them, because someday you're going to need to go back to them and just remind yourself.
Yeah.
I giggle because I looked at the Super Bowl and that guy's reading the Inner Athlete or whatever it was called on the side. Yeah. But what he's doing is he's just reminding himself on a regular basis about the emotional control that they need to have for big times. And depending upon who you are, as you mentioned, we need to model it, but then we need to encourage it. And it's like, well, sometimes people are just being idiots. Don't you fall into that trap? The sayings we used to get are different than what they have today. And my mom always used to say, well, if Hans jumps off the high bridge, are you going to jump off the high bridge? Yeah. I don't know, Ma. I don't know. If it looks like fun, maybe you would. No, but the point they're making is you don't have to follow everybody just because they do stupid things. Somewhere we have to have our own values, and that has to be instilled by the parents. And then we're going to have role models. Right now, I think most Americans would say, oh, I'd like to be like Brady and Matt Tkachuk.
Yeah.
After, but really is some of that stuff doesn't apply to what we're doing today. But on the international stage like that, they become role models. And I think that's the danger we have is who do we choose for a role model? We have to make sure that they have good ones. I've listened to Tom Brady. I've watched his Instagram, and he'll talk about his father. And most of the high-end athletes will usually either relate to their mother or their father. My dad and I had a different relationship where I put him in that category, but he wasn't the most influential guy for me. It was somebody else. But that doesn't mean I think less of my father. It was just other people that filled that role. So I had a different coach that I emulated, which kind of dragged me into the coaching profession. It went more that way. But I think once you have that role model and you look at their values and you model those, then I think we're good. I think you have a good base.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining me today, Schwartz. I got
we can do another one.
Now. I'd love to do this again. Thanks a lot.
All right, Hans. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yep. Bye.